Today, we're going to talk about the scope of the problem. We will review environmental toxicants that are covered on the tests, the exposure sources, and health impacts. We're also going to take a look at mycotoxins. We'll do a very high level overview of the oat, and then we'll zone in on a case study, do a couple closing reminders, and then cover some resources. And again, hopefully have a good amount of time for Q&A. So to set this graphic is from 2017. I looked again last night to try to find an updated version, and I can't find one, which is interesting. As of 2017, this is the ranking of the least to the most toxic countries, and it's based off of chemicals that they allow in their country, water samples, air samples, regulations that exist, etc. Because it's from 2017, which was surprisingly quite a while ago, obviously we expect this to look a little bit different now. I suspect there are no more green countries, right? The one thing that people always ask is I do a really great job of controlling this stuff. So how could I possibly be exposed? This particular graphic, and I'm a big fan of graphics, so there are a lot of them in the presentation, shows how people, even if you are doing your very best to avoid and minimize, these are other ways that you may be exposed because so many of these things are in air, they're in the soil, they're in our groundwater, they're in the feed that our livestock is eating. They're in the soil that our plants are being grown in. And so even if you don't use them, you do a very good job with your own world, we are still exposed. And then we spend roughly 90% of our lives inside. And while there are numerous regulations around outdoor air quality, there are very few, if any, regulations on indoor air quality. And when you start to think about all of the things that we bring into our homes, and especially if you have a newer home, how airtight that house is, now you're just cooking in all of these things that you're bringing into your home. So we tend to think about environmental toxins and toxicants as things that happen out there. However, a lot of them happen in our homes as well. So Mosaic Diagnostics offers a full range of EnviroTox panels, all the way through to things that do a high-level overview through to things that really dive into an EnviroTox burden, looking at all things toxicant. The patient population that we're talking about for these particular groups of tests are broad and varied, as you all know. They range from people with metabolic syndrome to cognitive dysfunction, mood disorders, lung disorders, liver issues, complex chronic disease, autoimmune diseases, allergies, infertility, and other hormone dysregulations, behavioral disorders, allergy type things. The list of people that we should be thinking about environmental issues as a contributing factor is large and broad. This is by no means all inclusive. So let's dive into the ToxDetect, which is Mosaic's look at the actual levels of the toxins. As you can see on this high-level overview, the report summarizes findings that are above the 95th and the 75th of NHANES, and then goes into additional detail grouped by type of compound, which is helpful when educating your patient and here are groups of chemicals that we're seeing trending elevated for you. There's additional education at the back that goes into significantly more detail that tends to be helpful for practitioners when they're working with their patients. So let's look at each of the individual categories. So phthalates, these are plasticizers. They make things soft and pliable. It's estimated, and the estimate was from 2018, that 5.5 million metric tons are used per year worldwide. These are the forever chemicals. You ingest them, you inhale them, you get them on your skin, and think about all of us who do nutrient IVs and vitamin injections. They're all in those tubings and in those plastic syringes. And they're associated with quite a range of disorders from metabolic all the way through to reproductive immune, and many of them are known carcinogens. And again, there's a lot of graphics in here. You guys have the PDF of this, so you can go back to these graphics. I find them incredibly helpful, especially when working with patients. Bisphenols, so both BPA and BPS. BPS is what replaced BPA when BPA was banned in the vast majority of places. Most studies on BPS find that it is at least as toxic, if not more so, than BPA. So it's a good lesson of beware of what replaces the toxic chemicals. We find it to be a contaminant in water and food and dust. Obviously, it's in your plastic products. One of the highest sources of BPA, surprisingly, though, is paper, but especially money, paper money. It's coated like those receipts. We touch it and absorb it because our skin's our largest organ of absorption, or we eat it, right? Because it gets in our foods. And again, it is associated with a host of diseases and disorders, endocrine disruptor, GI issues, disrupts our gut microbiome, behavioral issues, developmental, etc. And here are a couple really good graphics around how people are exposed, even if you're doing those, but I'm BPA free, I'm BPS free, I minimize plastics, etc. Remember that these things are getting into our environment in places that we wouldn't necessarily expect them to be, like our water and our soil and our foods. VOCs, these are volatile organic compounds. They are chemicals that easily vaporize, hence the name volatile. The length and the source of the exposure is what's particularly important with these particular class of chemicals. Examples of them are things like toluene, xylene, formaldehyde, benzene, etc. They're often found in our indoor air. This is one of our huge indoor air contaminants, although in our outdoor air, and they get in our groundwater and soil. We tend to inhale them, but it is possible to absorb them via skin or ingestion. And again, they have a broad impact in our bodies, from kidney damage and liver diseases all the way through to most of them are also known carcinogens. The ToxDetect has quite a few volatile organic compounds. This is a huge chemical class. And so you'll see that there are 3 or 4 pages of individual volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, on that report. This particular graphics, again, it focuses the first one on VOCs outside. So from industry, from automobile exhaust, from burning of trash, etc., all the way through to now we are looking inside our home, and all of the things that we bring in that off gas, these tend to be your VOC. So those smells that you smell when you bring in a new bookshelf or a new couch or any of those types of things, new carpeting, new flooring, everything like that, those are your VOCs. Parabens, they are preservatives. They help prevent oxidation, and they're also highly antimicrobial. So they're used in a lot of different things. They're used in personal care products, cosmetics, some foods. They're used also in a lot of pharmaceuticals. They have a cumulative impact. And so the more you're exposed, the more different layers of these that you are ingesting, that you're inhaling, that you're putting on your skin, they have this cumulative impact. And they're known carcinogens, they're endocrine disruptors, they are genotoxic, which means that they can be incredibly harmful for women who are pregnant or want to become pregnant, cardiac, all the way to your obvious skin irritation. And again, here are other graphics to show people all of the ways in which we get exposed to these parabens, not just the ones that we have control over. Is it in your personal care product, for example, but also the fact that it gets into the soil, it gets into our groundwater, and depending upon the types of filtration you're using, are exposed either by drinking it or by bathing in it. Pesticides, the ToxDetect now also includes glyphosate. It is on a separate report, but it is now included in ToxDetect to give a more rounded look at pesticide exposure. Pesticides are designed to kill living organisms fundamentally, right? So they're insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, and rodenticides. They are very stable and they bioaccumulate. That's what they were designed to do. And they're everywhere. So they're in our food system, they're in our soil, our water, and indoor and outdoor air. We eat them, we absorb them on our skin, we inhale them, and they're associated with a host of diseases, and they are predominantly known carcinogens, impacting neurological systems, endocrine systems, metabolic, etc. Again, graphic looking at how one might be exposed, even though they do not themselves use the pesticides. Flame retardants, this is one of the hardest ones for me. Flame retardants, they're there to reduce flammability and combustibility. They can be applied to something after it was made, like your couch or curtains, for example, clothing, a lot of flame retardants are actually chemically bonded to the material. For example, a lot of your wooden furniture these days, they're chemically bonded to the pressed wood that is within that structure. They're chemically bonded to the toys that our kids play with. They are either brominated or organophosphates. They are in the water that dusts the soil, and they're in our indoor and outdoor airs. They are frequently found in toys, bedding, furniture, and clothing. If anybody's tried to buy clothing for children, if you try to buy clothing, especially pajamas that are not treated with flame retardants, there's these huge, scary, bright yellow, orange warning labels that this garment is not flame retardant, and it's really preying on parents' fear. We are exposed to them. We absorb a lot of them because they are things that we put up against our skin. We also inhale them or we can ingest them. Many of them are known carcinogens and associated with kidney issues and neurological issues and immune issues and so on. This is a picture of all places. It's not obviously all of the places, but it's many of the places that the flame retardants are found. And it's hard to balance that wanting to protect our homes and our families and those that we love with wanting to protect our families and our homes and those that we love by not exposing them to chemicals. This one's a really tricky one because it impacts the teeny tiny little humans as well as the rest of us so much. Acrylamide. Acrylamide is organic. There's two different forms. There's organic and inorganic. The organic form is created when things are cooked at high temperatures. And what you'll see is being described as a high temperature is 248 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's pretty rare that I cook something at that low of a temperature. Usually most of us are cooking at a significantly higher temperature. And this chemical, acrylamides are used in water treatment and filtration. They're also used to stabilize soil. So they'll frequently line like canals and farms, and they're used a ton in industry. It's also found in tobacco smoke, and we get it through the expected exposure routes. We eat it, we ingest it, we inhale it, or it's on our skin because it's used in water filtration. So then we bathe in water that has acrylamide in it. So then we absorb it. And again, it's associated with a host of disorders, developmental mood disorders, neurological, and it is also a known carcinogen. This is a great graphic. We focus so much on the temperature at which we cook things, while this is helping us understand that the large majority of acrylamides are coming from water treatment facilities. And the one down on the bottom that I just popped up is looking at the dietary acrylamides. And we'll go through some ways that we can mitigate the formation of that. Perchlorate is a chemical that our body actually doesn't change as it tries to detoxify it. And so there's some question around, does it actually detoxify or do we store it the amount that we're not able to just excrete? Perchlorate is naturally occurring, but it's also a man-made chemical. So we find perchlorate in fuel, combustion fuel. We find it in fireworks, explosives, etc. The vast majority of us are not handling fireworks and explosives on a regular basis. However, because of rocket launches and all of the things that happen around us, it is in our air, and then it rains down and it gets in our soil and our groundwater. I live in Arizona. I live in the Southwest. And so the second way that we create perchlorate is something that I did not know and had a moment about. Anytime that sunlight or lightning hits oxygen and chlorine, perp is formed, which means those of us who spend our summers in a pool or in a lake or anywhere where you're exposed to sunlight, hopefully you're not in water during a lightning storm, but anywhere you're exposed to sunlight and oxygen plus chlorine, now you have perchlorate. And as you would expect, it's a contaminant in soil, water, and it also gets in our foods, again, because it's grown in the soil, water with the water. And perchlorate is predominantly associated with thyroid issues. And then all of those secondary things that we associate with perchlorate come from the thyroid impact. So things like metabolic disorders, GI disorders, developmental delay, etc. Those are all secondary to the fact that perchlorate really has a significant negative impact on thyroid function. Oxybenzone, most of us know this as an ingredient in sunscreen. It has been banned in one state, it's banned in Hawaii, in sunscreens. So we find oxybenzone not just in sunscreen, but then a ton of personal care products. It's also in plastics, and it's used in plastics to help them not fade when they're in the sun. It's fundamentally a UV filter. So we find oxybenzone in water, in sand, in soil, and in our dust. We absorb it through all of the ways that we know we absorb pretty much all of these chemicals. It does cross the placenta, and therefore studies have shown it is associated with negative birth outcomes. And this is the one that's also associated with coral bleaching. You can see an example of that here, which is why it's been banned in Hawaii and a lot of other countries. Again, this is a great graphic. So many people I work with go, nope, I don't ever use oxybenzone. So then we go through this and we start to look at other products that they bring into their home or that they put on their skin. And we almost always find oxybenzone in at least one of them. So now let's move on to mycotoxins. This particular picture to me is deceptive because it's just this beautiful kind of like dandelion looking thing, but it's this mycotoxin. So what are mycotoxins? They are small toxic molecules that are produced by some, but not all fungi. We ingest them because we eat them. Like anybody's like me, I grew up in a house where that bread, my mom would have cut the top off of the bread and fed it to us anyway. I know very many people would probably eat the strawberry in the far corner of that picture, despite the fact that everything around it has mold and is probably soft and squishy. And that strawberry probably has. We inhale it, right? This is your airborne, often indoor, because you've got mold in water damaged buildings, or there's mold in like your air conditioning system, whether that's in your house or in your car or at work. We can also absorb them because they come in contact with our skin or even our eyes. Some are used as antibiotics or drugs. Mycophenolic acid is used as an incredibly important drug for transplant patients. It suppresses the immune system so much that it allows the patient to keep the organ that was transplanted. It's an anti-rejection med. But many of them are incompatible with life. So they've been used as chemical warfare agents. We see this associated with sick building syndrome, and they are commonly animal and food contaminants. They do bioaccumulate. I know that most of them have a very short half-life, but there are studies that have shown the bioaccumulation of these mycotoxins, especially in different organs. So again, here's ways that we are exposed to mycotoxins, with the graphic on the right showing ways that you might be able to prevent and starting to detoxify some mycotoxins. The Mosaic Diagnostics MycoTOX profile, as with all of our profiles, has the summary of elevated results at the front and a lovely graphic that you'll see a close-up of here in a sec. And the rest of the results are in the back. I always encourage people, make sure you look at those, because if it wasn't above the red, it wouldn't be on those first pages. But we often find people who have detectable limits or above detectable limits, and that's still a positive finding. The rest of the report is dedicated to education. So really going in depth into what it is, what does it do in the body, what do we know about detoxification, and then these charts are some of my favorite things about this test. I use this when I work with people, and I just lay this down and highlight the ones that they're positive for. And we talk about those exposure sources. They can use this as a really handy guide when we're talking about adjusting diet and looking where could you possibly have been exposed to this. So this is that body diagram again. The World Health Organization calls mycotoxins the great masquerader. And that is because they impact so many different systems in our bodies. And the signs and the symptoms, the disorders that are associated with mycotoxins are so incredibly vast and so varied. It is hard to nail down, yes, this is mycotoxins, without actually measuring the mycotoxins. So let's look a little bit at the oat. So first and foremost, what are organic acids? So organic acids, they're metabolites of amino acids, fats, and carbohydrates. Breakdown. They were historically and are still used as a way to diagnose inborn errors of metabolism. For the most part, laboratories in the specialty diagnostic space, their reference ranges are not designed to diagnose those inborn errors of metabolism. We're looking at organic acids in a different way. They are also used as tart substances. So you'll find things like tartaric acid in wine. It gives it that tannin type flavor. You'll see it in other tart things like sour candies. It can also be naturally occurring in fruits and fruit products, malic acids in apples. It's also a really wonderful antimicrobial agent. Some of them are. So benzoic acid, sorbic acid, they're added to beverages, they're added to foods, especially your organic foods, because they are accepted organic needs of keeping a product from growing microbes. Why is it important to look at organic acids as part of that chemical environmental toxin picture? Again, coming back to this body picture, we know that environmental toxicants are associated with oxidative stress, inflammation, cell death, mitochondrial dysfunction, impaired immune function. And those are those high level things that then we encompass into GI disorders, metabolic disorders, carcinogens, endocrine disruptors, etc. So having insight not just on the chemicals, and this is your level of styrene, but also looking at how might that be impacting your mitochondrial function. That's why we look at an oat in association with looking at these environmental toxicants. The oat gives us insight into microbial overgrowth, mitochondrial health, neurotransmitter metabolites, methylation and detoxification functions, nutrient needs, and it gives us insight into toxic exposure through looking at these other substrates that can trigger a, hey, there's an issue here. So the microbial section of the O, we are predominantly looking for an overall pattern of highs and lows on this particular page. This page is separated into sections based on the types of metabolites. So is it a yeast and fungal marker? Or is it a bacterial marker, or does it tend to be mostly associated with specifically Clostridia? So you're looking at the overall pattern, but also the pattern within a particular section. If there are abnormalities in this particular section, we're going to talk about balancing the gut microbiome. We want to find sources because some of the things in the yeast and fungal markers can be triggered from mycotoxins. We're going to look at perhaps stool testing or maybe even some antimicrobials. The oxalates, we are looking predominantly for high results here. And so based off of this particular finding, we're going to first and foremost ask about the diet, right? Keep it simple before you get complicated. Do they have a diet that's high in oxalates? Do they eat a lot of leafy greens? Do they eat a lot of beef? Do they eat a lot of soy? We're also going to ask about vitamin C. Very high dose vitamin C can create oxalates. So are they someone who's dosing supraphysiologic vitamin C, whether that's oral or whether they happen to get a lot of like nutrient IVs or Myers IVs? And then beyond that, we know that many of the microbial imbalances we see on the first page, the byproduct of a lot of those are oxalates. And so if we're seeing a lot of abnormalities on the first page, we can see that cascade through to this particular section. For mitochondrial markers, we are typically looking at, again, the highs and the lows, but we also have to see the flow of markers because the glycolytic cycle metabolites, remember, this is what are we doing with our carbohydrates? And we need those end products, especially predominantly that pyruvic acid. We need to pull that into our Krebs cycle. It's that foundation that then starts our Krebs cycle wheel spinning. And our Krebs cycle is what spits out ATP, which is what gives us the majority of our energy. If we don't have enough coming in from that glycolytic metabolites, we don't have that glycolysis happening, we don't have acid, or we're not effectively pulling it into the wheel is already not going to spin great because it just doesn't have that substrate. And then also we're looking at it from those amino acid metabolites because we also pull those in. That's that lovely carnitine shuttle. So when we see abnormalities here, we're assessing for macro and micronutrient intake. So macro, do they have the carbohydrates to fuel a healthy glycolytic cycle? Do they have enough amino acids but also the micro. Do they have the B vitamins, B1, B2, B3? They're all cofactors in the Krebs cycle. Do they have enough iron? Do they have enough magnesium, manganese? All those things are cofactors in these cycles. We don't have enough of them. We will see hiccups and abnormalities. We'll see, like you see on this page, some things are really high, some things are really low because we've got to back up here. So this wheel is not spinning. It's more like functioning like a cog. We also know that some heavy metals can block these enzymes. We also know that some of our microbial metabolites can come into play here. So if we have a lot of toxins, mycotoxins, et cetera, sometimes we can see abnormalities here as well. So we would look at the heavy metals and we would look at nutrient testing or the nutrient section of the oat. The neurotransmitter metabolites, again, we're looking for highs and lows and the relationships to each other, specifically those ratios of the norepi to dopamine, so those dopacts. We can see abnormalities here if there are abnormalities on that first page again. So you're looking for this consistent pattern. We would assess for macro and micronutrient intake as well. These are made by bacteria in the gut acting on substances. So we are assessing for overall gut health. They're also made from amino acids. So if the person has low protein intake or they have a disrupted gut where they can't break down and absorb things, you can see abnormalities here. We can also see abnormalities, obviously, if they're on medications, but also if there are cortisol or hormone imbalances or genetic SNPs like CONT. The nutritional markers section, you're looking for highs and lows here. I always tell people be very careful. Watch the asterisks or that little starburst. Those markers are inverse markers, meaning if they're elevated, they're associated with an elevated need for particular nutrient. And this is a section that sometimes can trip people up because of that flopping back and forth. So when you have abnormalities in this particular section, and again, assess the macro and the micro intake, make sure that they're getting them in, assess their gut health, make sure that if they're doing a good job of getting them into their body, are they actually able to break down and absorb them? Assess genetic SNPs. Sometimes people have SNPs that create a supraphysiologic need. They just need more of these particular things. And then with the phosphoric, we can sometimes, there's an association with low phosphoric acid being associated with low serum vitamin D. Our ketone and fatty acid markers, were predominantly looking at high results. The lower results don't tend to be associated with relevance. This is the section we want to make sure that their standard labs are within normal limits. We want to look for insulin resistance. We want to ensure that we've ruled out diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. We are also wanting to assess macro and micronutrient intake. Are they on a ketogenic diet? In which case, elevations in this section are to be expected. These are ketones. Are they pushing themselves? So sometimes, similar to lactic acid way back in the glycolytic, sometimes people who are pushing themselves, they're under eating and exercising a lot, we'll see their body flip over to ketone usage. And so we can see these elevations here. We also wonder about oxidative stress. Typically speaking, when we're discussing this particular section, we're looking at including things like carnitine to help their body do what it needs to do, as well as additional antioxidants. The detoxification section, you're looking predominantly at elevations here. Again, this is a section where the lower findings aren't typically considered to be clinically relevant. There is one, this is our last inverse marker on the oat, and it's that pyroglutamic acid, and you see the single starburst. And elevations in pyroglutamic are associated with a high need, so an elevation and a need for glutathione. The one thing here that I always find interesting is number 61. It's associated with salicylates. It's associated with GI bacteria. So if you see abnormalities on page 1, you often see them reflected on that number 61. You can also see it associated with aspartame. And I find it incredibly effective to point this marker out if it's abnormal and ask them where they might be exposed to artificial sweeteners, and then just wait, just be quiet and let them answer. I have discovered amazing things about people that I work with by asking the question and just being quiet. Gentle reminder that we absorb things in our mouth. So if they chew a lot of gum that has aspartame in it, that can also elevate this. And they're still absorbed, even though they don't swallow that gum. So Other tests that you would think about from this particular section are the MycoTOX, the ToxDetect, heavy metals. And if that pyroglutamic acid is abnormal, for sure, you're going to be looking at some liposomal glutathione. So let's look at how we put all of these things together in the real world. How do we work with a patient? So this is the case of the very happy, but also incredibly tired nurse. So she's a 51-year-old female. She came in because she was struggling to lose weight. She had frequent headaches that were just getting worse. She was constipated and she crashed. So she was a nurse at a hospital, a busy hospital. She absolutely loves her job. So it's not like a work type stress. She gets more of an adrenaline rush at work. She works 4 10s and they tend to be back to back. And then she has 3 days off. That first day that she has off, she is completely, in her words, worthless. She cannot get out of bed. She gets out of bed, it's to go lay down on the couch. She is exhausted. The next 2 days, she's fine. That first day after those 4 10s, she crashes and she crashes really hard. She describes herself as happily divorced. She has recently relocated into a newer build condo, close to friends and family. She has a really active social life as well. She does not take supplements. She does not take medications. All of her labs are within normal limits. She averages 5 to 6 hours of sleep at night, pretty uninterrupted. And with the exception of that first day after her 4 10s, she feels like she wakes up pretty rested and ready to start her day. Her food choices are actually pretty good. She eats predominantly a Mediterranean diet, but she has a lot of grab and go stuff. So like she'll grab something from one of those healthy grocery stores. What is in it is good, but it's all grab and go type thing. She doesn't cook a lot. She doesn't prepare her meals ahead. On her 4 10s, it's hit her whether she eats at all during the day. She also, on the days that she's doing her 4 10s, she gets 15,000 some odd steps per day. But on the days that she is not working, she almost never even breaks 5,000 steps. She drinks approximately a liter of water every day. It's from the filter attached to the fridge, whether it's at home or whether it's in the break room at the hospital. And on the days that she's working, she tends to not drink a lot of water because she doesn't have the time to stop and go to the bathroom. So what we see here is she has one phthalate above the 95th of NHANES. She had another phthalate in the 75th. And then that number 1, while it's not technically above the 75th, it was measurable, which is a positive finding. She had bisphenols. Her BPS was above the 95th. Her BPA was below detectable limits, which is great, but her BPS is elevated. And again, BPS is what replaced BPA. So every time you see it BPA free, it probably has BPS. Her VOCs were actually not as bad as I expected them to be, given that she lived in a newer build and she bought some newer furniture and that kind of stuff when she moved in. She does have styrene, which we would expect from someone who does a lot of grab and go and a lot of takeout containers, right? These are your styrofoam containers or those disposable containers that you get from restaurants and stores. She also had a lot of benzene. It's an industrial solvent. I strongly suspect she's exposed to it at the hospital. Parabens weren't too bad. She only had one elevated, but it was above the 76th. And this, again, these are predominantly in your personal care products. They are also in some pharmaceuticals. She doesn't take any medications, but she's exposed, but she doesn't really touch them, right? She's got them in her gloves and stuff like that. She had a pesticide above 75th. She doesn't use them in her home. However, again, hospitals use pesticides quite a bit, and this one is specifically an insecticide. So again, we suspect that this is exposure to the hospital. And then she had a flame retardant. Her flame retardant DPP was above the 95th. Strongly suspect that this is from new furniture that she bought and put in her home. The fact that her home is a new build, and so a lot of the things within it were treated, chemically bonded with these flame retardants, but also almost everything at the hospital is treated with flame retardants. All of the sheets, all of the scrubs, all of the surfaces, etc., they're all treated with flame retardants. Her oat showed abnormalities in the yeast and fungal section. The rest of that first page was fine. This is telling me that she probably has some mycotoxins, and she may also have some other yeast fungal issues going on. Her oxalates were incredibly elevated. Part of this is probably due to diet. She does eat a lot of leafy greens. She does eat a lot of beets. She does eat a lot of soy. I don't think that's probably all of it. I think there's a little bit also coming from this microbial picture that we see on page 1. She had an elevation in lactic acid with a normal pyruvate, which means that her end products of glycolysis are being diverted. She took this first morning void that on her that day that she crashes. So she had just come off of running her butt off for 4 days. So that could be coming into play here. We produce lactic acid when we're in these anaerobic type states. But I also wonder about the nutrient deficiencies. I do wonder about how well she's actually pulling these things from glycolysis into her Krebs cycle. She had abnormalities in her Krebs cycle. We double checked. She avoided all apples. So that's not why malic acid is elevated. And again, I come back to the succinate thinking that it's probably either toxins or microbial overgrowth. It could be cofactors as well because she had needs, but I'm suspecting more toxins. Her detoxification, here we see that for pyroglutamic, it's right there, right? Office 33, and that's exactly what that is a positive finding. She's right there on the line, and I don't need to wait until she's tipped over the reference range. Her number 59 was pretty darn elevated. And again, this is either methylation or toxic exposure, but it's all through that methylation pathway. She's another one that I had the conversation around the aspartame, right? She's again right there at the upper edge. And for her, she chews a lot of gum during the day because she's self-conscious about her breath. She's hungry and it helps her not feel hungry. She's dehydrated and it helps her not feel dehydrated. So we had a conversation around the type of gum that she chooses. And her mycotoxin, she came back with 2 mycotoxins, aflatoxin and ochratoxin. So what did we do? Filter all the water, RO filter. So reverse osmosis. We want to filter everything out and then we can choose to put our minerals back in. That's going to be most people's best. Intentional exercise at least 4 days a week. It's going to overlap with some of her 410s. We talked predominantly, we want that probably to be strength training. HEPA filters everywhere. HEPA filters in her home. If she can find areas like slip one under the nurse's station in the hospital, that would be great. No shoes in the home, right? Don't track the stuff that you're running around in the hospital, let alone the stuff outside, into your home. We talked a lot about reducing plastics. We really don't want plastics to touch our food or our beverages, especially not if they're going to get hot, because that leaches all of the stuff from the plastic into your foods. Screen personal healthcare products for all of these toxicants, but especially those parabens. And then sauna daily if possible for at least 20 minutes. Shower immediately afterwards, and then make sure that you're not re-wearing the clothes that you saunaed in and you're not reusing those towels, right? You got toxins out, they were absorbed by your clothing and your towel. Don't put those things back on your body. Wash them first. From a diet perspective, we did a lot of conversations around food prep on day 2 or 3 of her break for those 4 days so that she could take meals with her. Breakfast and lunches at least, so that she gets some and some snacks. We talked about stainless steel containers, glass containers, etc. We want a whole foods based diet. We talked about organic. So Dirty Dozen Clean 15 comes in here. No artificial sugars. And then when she does eat out, because I get you're going to do some eating out, you're going to do grab and goes. How do we make better choices? How are we able to pick places that their to-go container isn't a styrofoam box, their to-go container isn't a plastic box? It is possible. And then at least 64 ounces of clean water every single day, even if it means she has to take a break during her work day to go to the bathroom. From an supplement perspective, binder, I tend to use blended binders. I have better success with those. This particular blended binder, I also do not have issues with people being constipated. Antimicrobial drops. She had something going on from a yeast fungal perspective. She did have mycotoxins, but she did not want to do a stool test. So I don't know if that's all that there was or if she also had microbial issues going on. Liposomal glutathione, multivitamin mineral pack that's formulated for detoxification support. I put her on maca at some point. She's 51 years old. She's perimenopausal. We're going to want to get ahead of that. Methylene blue in the morning on the days that she needs it. If she is waking up and she is dragging, let's get some methylene blue in there. It's phenomenal for fatigue. Melatonin at night before bed if she needs it, and perhaps a little bit of kava, because that can just do that calming to allow you to shut your brain off a bit and get some quality sleep. Melatonin is also an amazing antioxidant. Digestive enzymes with meals, probiotics, because I want to make sure that those antimicrobial drops, I have a little bit of control over what's filling those holes in because she is concerned about her weight. We're going to focus on that akkermansia also. A GI repair powder that contains these ingredients. I prefer powders because they come into direct contact versus capsules. So we want to make sure that the GI from her mouth all the way to anus is getting contact with those substances. And then there's a constipation tea that I have a lot of really good success with. So on the days that she is constipated, if the probiotics, the water, the movement, those things didn't help, then let's bring this tea on board until we get her normalized. Things that I would really like to do for her, but she declined. I suspect we're going to end up doing it later anyway, are heavy metals. Typically speaking, people who have environmental toxicants also have heavy metals. Lyme plus co-infections. Mosaic just launched a Lyme and co-infections panel. She is currently living in a part of the country that has a ton of ticks and is well known for Lyme. She doesn't remember tick bites, but it's where she grew up also. So I'd be stunned if she didn't have one. And the symptoms are similar. A GI 360 stool test. I want to look at that gut microbiome. The salivary hormones, because she is perimenopausal. I want to start to look at that. And I really want a cortisol ×4. And then at some point, I'd like to do SNP testing just to see if she's going to need these higher dosage of vitamins for perpetuity. So just a couple of things to think about and to keep in mind when you're working with this patient population. This field can get overwhelming really quickly. This graphic is one of my absolute favorites. I have it on my vision board. I have it taped to all of our bathroom mirrors. The person who has these huge, ambitious, super stretch steps, they're still down on the ground because that first step is so very far away. The person who has these tiny little incremental steps, they're already up at the top because they had these baby steps to get going. One of the best baby steps that you can do for yourself and for your patients is to minimize exposure. Do not use these products in or around your home. Don't use pesticides, minimize plastic, screen your personal care products, etc. No outdoor shoes inside the house. Everything you walk through outside comes into your home and gets ground into your floors if you wear the shoes you wear outside, inside your home. That being said, HEPA filters inside. Hit good HVAC filters if you live in a home that has central air conditioning. As Dr. Kaz says, the HVAC, that's the lungs of your house. You want to filter that air really well. Choose organic when possible. Educate them on Dirty Dozen, Clean 15. Lower the cooking temperatures. Most people are not going to cook things at a 248 degree or below 248 degrees Fahrenheit. However, it is really easy to add acid and antioxidants. Squeeze some lemon juice over it afterwards. Cook it with balsamic vinegar, etc. Screen your personal care products and screen them really well. Off gas outside your house. If you dry clean, put them outside, let them off gas out there. If you buy new furniture and you can, leave it outside for a few days before you bring it in. Air purifying plants. NASA did an amazing study on air purifying plants. You can find that information all over the place. Bring those into your home. Put activated charcoal or charcoal bits on top of the soil to mitigate mycotoxins. Small changes can have an incredibly large impact, especially when multiplied over the course of your life. So final closing things, empower your patients. There's a ton of stuff out there. The Think Dirty app, the Yucca app, you can just pop the barcode on your products and it'll tell you what's in them. Your patients do not have to memorize all the names. Control what you can control. Minimizing exposure. Remember, it's a lifestyle. You're going to slip up sometime. And we want to build those foundational health first. Mosaic has a ton of tools to help with this particular test panels. There are information on how all of the individual types of toxins are detoxified, as well as ways to support phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 detoxification, and additional information in linking those markers on the oat with environmental toxins and tests to consider if you have these things as abnormalities.
Welcome to Rupa Health, the best place to order, manage, and track results from over 30 different lab companies in one single place for free. It's going to take you under 2 minutes to sign up, and you can order any functional medicine lab for your client in under 30 seconds. Let me show you how it's done. So here's our beautiful interface. I'm typing in the name of my client, selecting the lab that I want to order for them, and hitting send. From there, Rupa and their amazing team handle the rest. They email the client, collect payment, and even offer an interest-free 3-month payment plan. We've also built the world's largest library of information about chronic health conditions, the lab tests that can help you find the root cause, and the evidence-based interventions that you can use to help people heal from them. It's called the Rupa Health Magazine. There, we have in-depth articles about almost any health condition you can imagine. And we give you step-by-step protocols that other clinicians have used to help their clients heal and that are verified by evidence-based sources. You should totally check it out, and it'll transform your practice. And we can't wait to see you. So make sure you sign up today at rupahealth.com.